Hello everybody, this is the second part of the video regarding the endocrine system. So far we talked about the hypothalamus and pituitary gland, we talked about the anterior pituitary gland or adrenal hypophysis and its hormone. Now we're going to talk about the posterior lobe of the pituitary gland that we call it neurohypophysis. So as you see here in this picture, so these are all the effect of the hypothalamus. That one of those was that the hypothalamus by itself is an endocrine organ and it's producing ADH, producing and releasing the ADH and oxytocin, right? So they are produced here and then they transfer by the neurons that they go and pass through in pendulum and get to the posterior lobe of the pituitary gland. Neurohypophysis. We call them neuro because of all these neurons that are connecting that to the hypothalamus, right? So ADH and oxytocin are coming here to the posterior pituitary and then they absorb to the blood by the capillary that we had here and they get toward the venous system and continue to the blood circulation of the body. Let's see what are the effects of these two hormones, ADH and oxytocin. These hormones are called neurosecretions because they are produced and released by neurons, right? So let's see what they do. The posterior lobe of the pituitary gland, also known as neurohypophysis, is innervated by the nerves from the hypothalamus, as you have seen. The hormones released by the hypothalamic neurons, and those hormones that are released by the hypothalamic neurons are called neurosecretions. That they include ADH, antidiuretic hormone, and OXT, oxytocin, right? So let's start from the ADH, antidiuretic hormone. We have another name for the ADH that we call it vasopressin. Why do we call it vasopressin? We call that ADH antidiuretic hormone because one function of that is antidiuresis, decreases the amount of the urine, the urination, right? That's its function. Therefore, we call it antidiuretic. But the same hormone has another effect too that applies that effect over the vessels. Vasal, you remember vasal means vessels. So what's the effect of that? Is vasopressin. It presses the vessels. So it means that it causes the wall of the vessels to contract and the size of the vessels gets smaller, the diameter of the lumen gets smaller, therefore it pushes all the content inside of the vessels, right? So it has two jobs here, and that's an important hormone in the regulation of the hemostasis of the body regarding the control of the blood volume and the blood pressure. So therefore, this hormone, because of the effect that it has, it releases in response to a rise in electrolyte concentration. What does it mean? You know what is electrolyte, like sodium, potassium, all the important ions that we have inside of the blood that we call them electrolyte. You remember when we talked about the plasma and the ions that they small that we have in the very tiny amount of the plasma that well, they are very important in the control of the hemostasis of the body. We call them electrolyte, right? Excuse me. So if we have a high concentration of those electrolytes in the body, what does it mean? When we say the concentration means the amount of the material in a certain volume of the fluid, right? That's the definition of concentration, right? So when a concentration of one material goes high, what does it mean? It tells you indirectly that the concentration of the water, that is the solute over there, that is the the one that these material or inside of that has got low. So it's not just only these material got high, their concentration got high. Therefore, it means that indirectly that the amount of the volume of the water in the body got low, right? So it needs a time to do something to reserve the water for the body, to keep the water and just don't let it get out of the body more, right? So that's one signal that sends and causes the release of the ADH. The other one is the time that we have a fall in blood pressure. So whenever we have the fall in the blood pressure, we need to blood pressure to get high, to get back to the normal level that it had, right? And as we said, one function of the ADH is as a vasopressin, right? It put pressure over the blood in the way that makes a constriction of the blood, and therefore it makes the increase in the blood pressure. So these are the two situations that we need something is done, and those things can perfectly be done through this hormone ADH. So this hormone can be released in response in these two situations. And ADH targets the nephrons of the kidney. That's one place after it release. So that's the situation that causes the release of the ADH, from where it sends a signal to the hypothalamus. Hypothalamus releases the ADH, comes to the posterior pituitary. From the posterior pituitary gets into the blood and then go and affects over its receptor. Where in the body its receptor are located. One place is the nephrons of the kidney. In the kidney, we have units that we call them nephron. Nephron are the structures that are units of the nephron that they are doing all the jobs of the kidney, right? So it acts over the kidney, causes the kidney to retain water, prevents dehydration. So it doesn't let the water goes through the urine, gets out of the body. It acts over specific parts of the nephron and doesn't let the water go out. Prevent release of that and retain the water. Get it back toward the blood vessels and then get it back to the circulation of the blood. Constricts peripheral blood vessels, as we said, and in that way elevates blood pressure. So these are the two effects of the ADH, and now you know all the pathway. At what time it starts working and how it's working all the way from the hypothalamus all the way to the kidney and blood vessels. So that was regarding the ADH. What about the other hormone of the posterior lobe that we call it oxytocin, OXT? Oxytocin targets the smooth muscles of the uterus. Therefore, that's what is the function of that. When it affects on the smooth muscles of the uterus, it means that it's doing the contraction of the muscle over there. And whenever we have the contraction of the uterus, what does it do? It pushes the baby to get out of the uterus. So its job is at the time of the delivery that the baby is going to be born. Targets the contractile cells of the mammary gland. So around the glands that they are producing milk, we have some contractile cells that when they are contract, they are pushing the milk out, right? So in other words, they are helping ejection of the milk. So pay attention that oxytocin has no role in the production of the milk, but it has a role in the ejection of the milk so that the milk can get out of the mammary gland and the baby can use it. Causes contraction of the smooth muscles of the uterus resulting in uterine contraction, as we said, and causes the myoepithelial cells of the mammary gland to release the milk from the nipple, as we said. Also, in the male, oxytocin can have an effect that causes the smooth muscle contractions in the prostate gland. So don't forget about that one. It's not only effect in the female, right? So here you see the hormones of the posterior pituitary that we have ADH and oxytocin. ADH, antidiuretic hormone or vasopressin, targets the kidney, promotes the reabsorption of the water, and elevation of both blood volume and also the blood pressure. When it acts, blood pressure is through the causing the vasopressin or the contraction of the muscles of the blood vessels. And oxytocin, OXT, targets the uterus and mammary gland in female, and as we said, prostate gland in the male, causes labor contractions and milk ejection in the female, and in the male, oxytocin targets the ductus deferens, that is structures that we have in the male reproductive organ and also in the effects on the prostate too, and this causes contractions of the ductus deferens and prostate and ejections of secretions of those two, right? So these are the effects over the male and female. And also here, that's a good example of another type of the feedback that we have in the body. Previously, we talked about the negative feedback, and we said that most of the hormones in the body, they control through the mechanism of the negative feedback. When they are high, they send the signal, say, oh, we are high, therefore they send the signals to the higher organ, and those ones bring the secretion low. When they are low, send the signal, we are low, and then they detect that low amount of them and they increase the secretion, therefore they get back to the normal. That's a negative feedback. But here we see another type of feedback that we call it positive feedback, and one good example of that is through the oxytocin. So as we see here, after the baby is born, it drinks the milk, and just the sucking effect of the mouth of the baby, this just sucking of the nipple, it just makes these all these ducts that are producing the milk to, let's just start from here. When you have this one, this physical effect and also the emotional effect that you see that from the hypothalamus, just seeing, watching of the baby and all the process here, it triggers the secretion of the oxytocin from the hypothalamus that goes toward the posterior pituitary. Pay attention in this picture, it just had been viewed from the other angle, but still this is the posterior pituitary, right? So oxytocin produced here in the hypothalamus goes all the way to the posterior pituitary. Then it gets into the blood and goes and affect over the mammary gland, and then over there it causes the myoepithelial cells to contract the gland and the milk eject. So when the milk ejects, what will happen? When the baby has more milk available, then it gives the satisfaction and the baby sucking more, right? When it sucks more, then it makes again goes a feedback to the hypothalamus, more oxytocin, more ejection, more sucking, more oxytocin, more ejection, and then it continues. As long as the baby is sucking the nipple, the secretion of the hypothalamus continues and makes the more milk to be ejected and continue. So this is a positive feedback. As you see, increasing of the sucking causes the increasing of the oxytocin, increasing of the oxytocin causes the increasing of the ejection, increasing of the ejection causes increasing of the sucking. So it's like a loop that each one increase, right? That's the one that we call it a positive feedback. And now you can notice what's the difference between the positive feedback and the negative feedback that we discussed, for example, for the thyroid hormones, right? So that was all that we wanted to discuss about the hypothalamus and pituitary gland. That was just a brief, but unfortunately we don't have much of the time, so we cannot go over all the organs of the body. We just go over a pancreas. So that much has left from this chapter. Let's go and finish this one. Pancreas. Pancreas is part of it has, as we said, it has two functions and is part of the two systems of the body. One part of the pancreas is part of the endocrine system and it has endocrine function. It means that it produces some hormones that they go into the blood and when they get to their target organ start acting, right? That's the endocrine. Also, it has some exocrine part and due to that one produce some enzymes, some secretion that they go through some ducts and they pour over a lumen and they start acting, and that's part of the digestive system. That part, exocrine function of that, it makes pancreas part of the digestive system too, right? So as you see, it has both exocrine and endocrine functions, and exocrine function produces digestive enzyme, and endocrine function consists of some islets, like the islands that we have in the middle of all the other parts. We call them pancreatic islets. And pancreatic islets contain four major cell types. So here, as we are discussing about the endocrine system, we're talking about the endocrine part of the pancreas. When we get to the digestive system, then we are going to talk about the exocrine functions of the pancreas over there, right? So regarding the pancreatic islets that are endocrine parts of the pancreas, they have four major cell types that we call them alpha, beta, delta, and F cells. So these are four types of the cells that we have in the pancreatic islets, that they are endocrine parts of the pancreas, and each one of them have a specific hormone that those hormones get into the blood, and when they get to the target organ, they have their own specific functions. So these are producing hormones. Now here regarding the location of the pancreas, this is the stomach and this is the first part of the small intestine. We call it duodenum, and as you see, the pancreas, that is this yellow part, this yellow organ that you see here, pancreas, is located just in this loop of the duodenum. It starts from here. This is the head of the pancreas. Then we have the body of the pancreas, and finally we have the tapering tail of the pancreas here. So that's the location. So among the hormones that is produced is insulin and glucagon. Let's talk about it more. In the pancreas is highly vascularized. So as you know, an endocrine gland needs to pour secretion to the blood. So it needs blood vessels to be around the gland, right? So it's highly vascularized. It has fenestrated capillaries so that it can ease the exchange of the material with the blood, right? So that's the type of the capillary that we have in the pancreas, supplied by the pancreaticoduodenal artery. That's a branch of the aorta that gets and comes and supplies the pancreas. It's named pancreaticoduodenal, supplies the pancreas and parts of the duodenum, and also supplies by the pancreatic arteries. So these are two vessels that are nourishing the pancreas, and about the pancreas itself is about 20 to 25 centimeters long. It has a large rounded end that we call it head of the pancreas, that, as I showed you, in the loop of the duodenum connects to the duodenum of the small intestine, and it has a pointed tail that extends toward the spleen, toward the left side of the body, as I showed you. So the tail is going toward the spleen. as you see here. So this is the duodenum, have been cut here, was like this. This part is the head of the pancreas, then you have the body of the pancreas in the middle, and finally you have the tail of the pancreas, and here that's the location that you will have the spleen here at the end here. It hasn't been shown here. Now you see that when you look at the structure of the pancreas itself, you will see that in the middle you have a long duct here. Not all the branch have been shown, but from all around you have a small ducts that finally they all get into this big main duct that all the exocrine secretions of the pancreas, all the digestive enzymes getting into these ones, and finally they get into the duodenum. When the food comes here, all these secretion and enzymes goes over top, right? We'll talk about these ones more when we get to the digestive system. But let's talk about the endocrine part of that here. Just wanted to show you that you see that when you look at the pancreas, it looks like a little bit like a rice cakes, but what do you call it? Those crispy rice ones, right? It's like those ones that you have lobules, separate parts by each other. These small ones called lobule. Now let's go over the histology that we have in the pancreas to go talk more about the endocrine part of the pancreas. So here, as you looking at this drawing here, you see that you have lots of these secretory part here that in the middle they have a small duct. These are all around that you see here, they are part of the exocrine part, that they finally pour their secretion into a big duct and finally it goes to a duodenum, right? We call those ones as the pancreatic acini. So pancreatic acini are part of the exocrine part of the pancreas. We are going to talk about these islets. This big part here in the middle is a pancreatic islet, and these are the part of the endocrine parts. So these pancreatic islets, that also they're called islets of Langerhans. So these islets of Langerhans are endocrine parts. They have 4 types of the cells. You don't need to recognize them from each other over the picture or over the histology, but here is a good place to see that all these 4 types, they are kind of mixed with each other, right? We have alpha cell, beta cell, F cells, and delta cells. But as you see here, and here you see the actual histology, and you see that how these endocrine parts are located among the exocrine parts, right? Now, each one of these cells, these 4 types of the endocrine cells, have their own secretions. And what do we call their secretion? They are generally hormones, right? So from alpha cells, we have the hormone glucagon. From beta cells, we have the hormone insulin that we all know about it, right? From the F cells, we have pancreatic polypeptide, and from the delta cells, we have the somatostatin. Somatostatin. So make sure that you are differentiating between all those somato things, right? Remember, we have in the growth hormone, we have the cells that the growth hormone affect over the liver, and you have another one here in the pancreas. So just a few words regarding the pancreas and the endocrine parts of the pancreas. We said that we have glucagon, that they are released from the alpha cells of the islet, pancreatic islet. The functions of the glucagon stimulates the liver to break down glycogen to form glucose. Glycogen is the combined form of the glucose, the storage form of the glucose in the body. When we eat food and it goes and digested to all the small ingredient of the glucose, for example, we are not able to use all those glucose at once, and if We want to use them later, so we store them in the form of the glycogen in the body. But when the body needs glucose, it has to break down those glucose to make it to take the glucose out of them, and that glucose become accessible as the source of the energy to produce ATP, right? So that's the one job of the glucagon, to stimulate the liver to break down glycogen to form glucose, because one place that the glycogen is stored is in the liver. Also stimulates the liver to put glucose into the bloodstream. After breaking down the glycogen to the glucose, it helps that to put it into the blood. Otherwise, if it remains in the liver, there is no use for that, right? Therefore, the effect will be raising of the level of the glucose in the blood. Raises blood glucose level, right? So that's the main job of the glucagon. Increases the level of the glucose in the blood. The other hormone that we have, insulin, that is released from the beta cells of the islets. Make sure that you remember in which cells are producing which hormone and all the effects of each hormone that we're talking here. So insulin is produced from the beta cells of the pancreatic islets, and its effect is opposite to the glucagon. How does it work? Insulin increases the rate of the glucose absorption to the cells by body cells, right? So whenever insulin is available to the cells, it is like opens a door so that the glucose from the blood can enter the cells. So when the glucose from the blood enters the cells that are around the blood vessels, what will happen to the level of the glucose inside of the blood? That one goes down, right? So that's the effect of the insulin over the blood glucose level. This lowers the blood glucose level. The amount of the glucose in the blood goes down. How? Because insulin opens the door to the cells, opens the specific channels that we have for the glucose on the cells so that the glucose can enter the cells. Therefore, the level of the glucose in the blood goes down. So that was glucagon and insulin, and as you see, these two are affecting opposite to each other. I have to mention regarding the glucagon, as it is increasing the blood glucose level, it is part of the hormones that they are acting at the time of the stress, right? At the time of the stress, our body needs more glucose, it needs more energy so that can counter that stress, right? So that is one of the hormones that we call them stress hormones. Glucagon is one of the stress hormones because at the time of the stress is releases and it causes the level of the glucose in the blood goes up so that everywhere in the body that needs glucose to produce ATP and do its function can have access to that one. Right? So the other two cells that we have from the pancreatic islets are somatostatin and pancreatic polypeptide, PP, pancreatic polypeptide. So somatostatin comes from the delta cells of the islets, and its function is inhibiting production of the glucagon and also inhibiting the production of the insulin, both of them. And it slows the rate of the absorption along the small intestine. And all of these results in inhibiting growth, right? So it's acting opposite to the growth hormone, somatostatin, right? And pancreatic polypeptide that come from the F cells of the islets, pancreatic islets. Its job is inhibiting the gallbladder contractions and helps to regulate the production of some pancreatic enzyme. So as you're looking here, this pancreatic polypeptide, it has an effect over the digestive system, right? Gallbladder is part of the digestive system that are releasing the bile, right, over the food so that it can be digested, right? Also, the pancreatic enzymes, they have a digestive function, right? So as you see, this pancreatic polypeptide is acting over the digestive system. So remember that this inhibits the gallbladder contractions. Gallbladder contraction is the one that releases the bile because the bile is stored inside of the gallbladder. When the wall of the gallbladder pushed, therefore the bile is released from that. So this one inhibits that effect, right? Makes the gallbladder to relax and do not release the bile from it. And helps to regulate the production of the some pancreatic enzymes, right? So those are the function of the PP, pancreatic polypeptide, that they are released from the F cells of the islets here. And again here you see all the islets in the context of all the other exocrine parts. You remember the acini, pancreatic acini, they are all exocrine part among, and in the middle of them you have a few number of the pancreatic islets. So here you are looking at the alpha cells that you have here, and also you see the beta cell here. You don't need to differentiate them and recognize them by histology. Just know their function and all this. So as you see that the second video comes very short because I wanted to have the continuity of all the hormones that we had from the pituitary gland, keep them in one place. So have a great time, and I'll see you for the next videos coming soon. Have a great day.